Greetings and welcome back, everyone. This is the Angry Chicken. I'm Garrett. Joss, you are here as always. How you doing?
I'm good. I am here. I'm excited. There's so much. I was worried it was going to be a quiet week, but we have so much stuff to talk about. I'm stoked. Even some stuff that we totally forgot about. Whoops.
We had one of those weeks where when we had our pre-meeting, and it was all from the top of our head. We're like, there's not really much going on in Hearthstone, is there? And then, like some sort of explorer club, we just barely scratched the surface and was like, oh my God, actually, there's a ton to talk about. Lots of things. And that includes announcements for things that are the Angry Chicken specific and things that are exciting, like possibly giving away 5 Tombs of Terror Deluxe Adventure Bundle codes. 5 of them.
That's exciting.
Yes. And I am, I believe, required to tell you that Blizzard sent us 5 Tombs of Terror Deluxe Adventure Bundles as giveaways to the Angry Chicken community. We would mention that anyway, even if it wasn't required, but you know how these things go.
Garrett covers his butt.
I do. Usually. I mean, very few people actually want to see it. But if you're unfamiliar, you can go and actually pre-order the Tombs of Terror right now. And there is an option for a deluxe adventure bundle. And that includes all 4 chapters plus the final fight, or the finale fight. The League of Explorers card back, and 1 random Saviors of Uldum legendary. Which means, so Jocelyn, I am not unfortunately allowed to win our giveaway.
Me either, but I guess, apparently.
I want to because my pack opening luck was so lousy. So that random legendary would really actually help me quite a bit. So I guess I'm going to pre-order this because I want it. But I
totally forgot that there was a random legendary tied to this too.
Well, there's 2 levels. There's like, if you go and like, you're going to go spend your own hard-earned cash and not get lucky and win the codes we're about to give away, there's an option to just pre-order it for the normal cost, which I think is $5 cheaper. And then there's the deluxe, which throws in that random legendary, which is pretty sweet.
That's how the card back. So
yeah,
you know which one I'm buying.
Yeah, we haven't like talked about kind of buying things in Hearthstone in a while, but the way they get me is with like random guaranteed legendaries because I have the worst luck on Earth. That's how they get me.
And the completionist in me has to have all of the card backs. So they got me there. Even though I use like probably 4 or 5 that I rotate through, I still I need it.
And you will never get that golden one from China.
Yeah, that's true. I will always have that hole. And apparently I missed one, like Christmas time. There was like a Christmas event last year. And obviously we were super busy with wedding prep. And apparently I didn't do whatever I needed to do to get that freaking card back. So
I love that 2 months before your wedding, you couldn't make it happen. But 1 month before your wedding, you could. Because you didn't miss the January card back. You missed the December.
Well, no, I have all of the like monthly card backs, but whatever I was supposed to do is probably a daily quest or something to get the card back. And I didn't do it because I wasn't paying attention. I was preoccupied. So I failed.
I'm sorry, Jocelyn, but
I will always have that stain on my card back collection.
Well, folks,
so much shame.
You may not have to, listeners out there, you may not have to shell out your own hard-earned dollars if you're interested in the Tombs of Terror Deluxe Adventure Bundle, because we have 5 codes to give away. Thanks again to Blizzard for sending those codes over to us, and we have set up, just like last time, 4 ways to enter. Jocelyn, you set this up on Gleam again.
I did. So basically, it's super, super easy if you entered the last one because all you have to do is all the things you did last time. So enter using your Twitch account. So tie your Twitch account to Gleam. Follow us on Twitch. Visit youtube.com/amovetv and follow us on Twitter. So if you're already have your Gleam account linked to your Twitch and you follow us on Twitch and Twitter, then you have 3 entries already just by going to the website. So link is in the show notes. I threw the link in the chat room as well. You guys can go and try to win yourself a Tombs of Terror bundle.
We will also embed the Gleam embeddable thingy over at amove.tv like we did last time. If you're watching on the live stream, we haven't done that yet. But if you're hearing this in podcast form, it's up. Head on over to amove.tv and enter to win. It's fine. If you're already doing these things, by the way, too, all you have to do is go to Gleam and like inform Gleam that you have already done these things and you're entered.
Yeah.
So go check it out. Best of luck to everybody. And I am jealous of all 5 people that win. All 5 of you.
I'm just super excited for Tombs of Terror in general. Like, I think it's going to be really, really good. I look forward to seeing the little changes that they made by combining the classes. I think it's going to be neat.
I mean, I was just right about what they were adding to it. So I'm clearly excited because #Garrett was right.
Yeah. Oh, I hope that's not actually a hashtag that goes anywhere.
Well, considering I've had to look at #Joss is right many times, I hope it does.
That's because I'm right, like always.
Clearly. You're going to ride that life drinker into the sunset. That's what you're going to do.
Are you kidding me? Of course.
And it's going to be a golden one. The other thing we have to announce for the Angry Chicken fans out there is Taco is returning. The Angriest Chicken Open, our series of community tournaments that we put on here at the Angry Chicken. Thanks to those of you supporting us over at patreon.com/TAC. It is coming back. Saviors of Taco is here. We're doing another Angriest Chicken Open for Saviors of Uldum. And if you are a $2 or up patron, you can go and sign up right now. As I am speaking to you, the post is already live over at patreon.com/TAC. It's going to be taking place on Saturday, September 28th. We're going to be firing off at noon Eastern time. The format will be best of 5 Conquest with 1 ban. Conquest is coming back. We're done.
Yes, Conquest is back, but we're not doing the Shield phase because we weren't 100% sure if Battle 5 supported it. So it's as close to current Grandmasters as we could get, which basically is just the format you guys are all familiar with. So Conquest and a ban.
Our goal is to not confuse Battle 5 because we would like this to be as user-friendly as possible.
Exactly.
So yes, standard Conquest with 1 ban will be the format. Best of 5 for all rounds. And as for prizes, 1st through 4th place will win 15 packs. As usual, we will also be drawing 2 random winners outside of the top 4 who will also win 15 packs. So just by participating, you'll have a chance to win yourself a bundle of 15 card packs. So go check it out. And it's not just for patrons, by the way. Next week, it will open for all patrons. And then a few days later, signups will be open for everyone. And we're also giving you plenty of notice this time. So September 28th, it's a Saturday. Mark your calendars. Throw down with your Angry Chicken friends in a friendly Conquest tournament. Again, head on over to patreon.com/TAC once I learn how to talk and sign up. And we'll remind you.
Don't worry, I'm putting links in the chat room and there's links in the show notes. So you don't have to talk. Just tell people to go read.
Rad. Well, Joss, you and I tend to kick the show off with some light banter about something vaguely Hearthstone related. But there's a big subject on my mind when it comes to Hearthstone this week, and it's Zephyrs. Or Zephrys, as I've been saying, and when I don't say Zephyrs, it makes people really mad on YouTube. So I'm going to call him Zephrys today.
I was going to say that's the way that I like it. Yes. Zephrys.
Zephrys or Zephrys is how I may also say it.
Is he suddenly a snake?
Yes. I mean, why not? He can be whatever he wants to. It's a made up name. Yeah. But I've been watching the most Grandmasters I have all year. And in the last week, we're now in week 3, I believe. Mm-hmm. Well, week 3 has wrapped up.
We just completed group 3, week 3.
Week 3, yeah. Onward to week 4 this coming weekend. But you know, catching up on week 3, watching all these VODs, I noticed, Zephrys and freaking Mass Dispel, or more specifically, Zephrys and the lack of offering Mass Dispel in situations where it seems like it would certainly be the quote-unquote perfect card for the situation. I noticed that happening time and time again. Either casters, like as the animation is going Mass Dispel, and then going, still no Mass Dispel. We have proof that Mass Dispel can be offered.
Yes, it is. It is in the pool. It's one of the cards, because I think when Celestalon came on to talk to us about Zephrys specifically, he did say that there's only a few cards that are basically along the lines of like the vanilla neutral minions, like stuff like that won't be offered. So like you'll never get like a Yeti because why? But we know that Mass Dispel is in the pool somewhere. Like Garrett said, that it has been offered in certain situations before, but it doesn't seem to be coming up all the times that it necessarily should be.
Yes. And that's been an interesting question. I kind of put out a joke tweet over the weekend that was Grandmasters season 2, the one where Zephrys doesn't know how Mass the Spell works. And one of the immediate responses I got was, no, it's the one where competitors in Grandmasters doesn't know how Zephrys works. And I found that I realized we're exchanging quips and we're trying to be funny and sarcastic and yuck, yuck, yuck. But it was actually kind of an interest. I found an interesting thought in that that exchanging of smartassery, which is, kind of at a surface level, how do we think you should be rewarded when it comes to Zephrys? Because the pitch, as I understood it, was if you understand the classic and basic set, the cards that exist within it, and how you can manipulate the board state to where a specific card in the classic or basic set would be perfect for you, you should be able to predict exactly what you're going to be offered. That was kind of the pitch in my head. That's what stuck. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. So if you have a really strong understanding of classic and basic set, and specifically how the options in that set can interact with a multitude of different board states, or also just your opponent's at 6 health, though that's an easy one. I would hope we all know how that works out. But cool, you should be rewarded for that. But as we've seen, there's some quirks with Zephrys. We've also seen hot fixes to teach this card specifically how certain things work, like Doomsayer or weapons, for example. And it's just it's muddied the waters a little bit. And obviously, in our talk with Celestin, there's a I don't want to use the word reluctance, but they don't want to go too far. They don't want to overdo it with teaching Zephrys how certain things work, or zeroing in on the card and hard coding how it's going to react to certain things. But they clearly have had to step in some cases. Where do we draw the line, and is Mass the Spell on the other side of that line?
It's a good question. I mean, I kind of understand, I guess, both sides of this argument, because I am of the mind that if you put a card in your deck and you are competing at the highest level of Hearthstone, which is what they keep telling us Grandmasters is, then I feel like you should know the cards in your deck and all of their quirks and all of their interactions. Like, you should know what you're putting in your deck, essentially. So I think, on one hand, you should know the situations where Zephrys will and won't give you what card. And if you play with the card enough, you start to know what gets offered and what doesn't. And if you're playing the card and expecting an outcome that has never happened in testing, then that's on you for not testing enough, or like not being aware or whatever. But I also see the other side of it, because if I'm playing Zephrys and I am like buying into the hype, we'll call it, then I'm taking Team 5 at their word and thinking, okay, I know as a player right now that if I want the perfect card, I know what that perfect card is. That perfect card is Mass the Spell. It's in the classic basic set. When I play Zephrys, I should get this. So I see both sides of this argument, and I'm not really sure where I kind of fall. And the Twitter poll that you did, because we put a Twitter poll up on TAC Podcast. So it's pretty much, it's split like me. It's almost right down the middle, 55-45. So
yeah,
we
had a few cheeky folks, not cheeky. I think they were being legitimate and earnest when they replied to the tweet saying, hey, where's my option for yes, or where's my option for both?
Yeah.
Because in classic fashion, I'm riding the line as well. Like, I think it's fine either way, as long as we know which way it is. Mm-hmm. And right now, clearly, Mass the Spell is not being offered in situations where we as players would think it should be. And I think that's okay, as long as you know that. And if you're playing this game professionally, if you're in Grandmasters, you should be testing for it. And clearly certain players have been testing Zephrys more than others.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you're kind of then you should understand the quirks and where that line is, and you should test it. If I'm understanding you correctly, you're falling on the quirk side of the argument. I
mean, my gut reaction is I would like this card to work as
do
advertised.
What it says it's,
yes.
Yeah, do what it says.
Like if I go Mass Dispel because this board is dumb, and if I don't silence all of it, I'm going to lose this game, and I don't get that card, and it instead offers Hex, which is what I saw all weekend in Grandmasters, that bumps me out. In terms of its impact on pro gaming, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think it's fair to think that the responsibility then falls to the players to test the card enough. To me, I'm also bringing in the baggage of the general player base into this. Like, I think we should look at Zephrys and go, oh, I'm going to get the perfect card, and it should just work that way.
Yeah. And I kind of agree. I guess that's what it really comes down to, is which part of the player base are we discussing right now? Because I think it is on Grandmasters to understand the quirks of the cards that they're playing with, but for the majority of players who aren't playing at the absolute highest level of Hearthstone, then maybe it should work a little bit more. Like, I guess the way I'm looking at it is me with my Joss brain, which, is not ideal. But if me with my Joss brain, I can figure out a card that I need in a certain situation that's going to be best, like Mass Dispel, and then the computer doesn't offer me that option, I'm going to be pissed, because the computer should be smarter than me. My Joss brain's not great.
Yeah.
So if I can figure it out and Zephrys can't, that's where I start to get bummed.
Yeah. So that's kind of where my head is at in that regard. It's also the kind of thing where it's like, I don't think it's the end of the world. And that's why I'm riding that line, is like, if we're talking about it in regards to its impact on pro play, I think it's okay where it is. And I think we can take the time. I don't know. Like, if I had to make a prediction, it's that I think eventually we're going to see a Mass Dispel hotfix.
Yeah, I would think so too.
Offering.
Yeah.
Because it just seems a little funky, and it seems to me, an outsider, it looks very much in line with the issue with Doomsayer and the issue with weapon removal.
Yeah, this does remind me a lot of weapon removal, to be honest, because it's like, yeah, there's probably other things you can do or ways you can deal with things, but weapon removal for 0 attack weapons, like, that's the thing that you really need to get rid of. So same sort of thing with Mass Dispel. Like, yeah, there are ways to remove like the most stats from the board, which would be a Hex, but it would actually be better to leave those, vanilla statted minions on the board, because what the problem really is they're death rattles or whatever. So yeah, I think that it sounds to me like Mass Dispel, or at least if I was Team 5, I would think Mass Dispel would fall into the things that Zephrys should know bucket. But it doesn't feel edge casey to me. It feels kind of core to a lot of the gameplay. So I think Mass Dispel is something we'll probably see, or at least I hope we would see a hotfix to teach Zephrys a little bit more about Hearthstone.
Yeah. There's a lot of chatter going on in the chat room as well. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I found it fascinating that at least in our small little poll, it seemed to be damn near split. Favoring the classic basic set being what you should be focusing on and rewarded for your knowledge base of, went one out, but not by a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I just found that interesting. And also, while we're on the subject of Zephrys, Slippery Joe and Alberto wrote in and said, howdy, Angry Bears. This was to tacpodcast@gmail.com if you ever want to write it into the show, and said, why are we not more outraged by Zephrys the Great? I have had countless wins absolutely stolen from me because of the cards this guy generates. Might as well say win game on the front, and the 3-cost mana cost, WTF. What so you can play this card and play the card it generates on the same turn. This card is going to see a nerf, right? Because it is in absolutely every deck. I am very salty about this card because I just lost to it and I am getting close to snapping my crayons. I love the self-awareness at the end of Slippery Joe's email here. And I would like to say that I hope you've calmed down since, because our rational discussion of the card is most likely going to make you angry.
Yeah. But I do think, this is kind of what we were worried about, right? When Zephrys was first announced, and especially once we started playing with him, and especially after we started to see him being placed into decks that weren't even Highlander style decks. So his supposed build around, like, his effect is so powerful. and can win you a game quite often when you play him like later on. You, especially if you're a deck that's trying to draw through your whole entire deck, it becomes really easy to play this guy. And you don't necessarily see as a player all of the steps that go into, you know, playing Zephrys at the right time and the right way. And it might feel like you're constantly losing to this card, but you're constantly losing to this card because your opponent is waiting long enough so that he activates, drawing through their deck, living until that point. Like, there's a lot of gameplay that has to happen before you play Zephrys, and he gives you, like, it's not like you play Zephrys on turn 2 or turn 3 and then he gives you, you know, 4 mana, deal 30 damage, kill your opponent, like, cards, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of planning and gameplay that goes alongside Zephrys, but I understand the sentiment, and I'm borderline worried about it. I'll put it that way. Because I mean, well, it's even in the Celestial One interview that we did, it was like the one question I absolutely wanted to ask. And I was like, Blizzard better let me ask this question, because I really want to know if you're worried about this in competitive play. But I mean, even just the Master Stall conversation that we just had, we were talking about, you know, should you know the basic classic set or should you know the quirks? And the fact that he has quirks means that there is some skill involved in playing him. And knowing what the outcomes are going to be in different board states, you actually see players, like I think it was Orange, be really rewarded for their knowledge and the amount that they actually tested and played with the card. So I think there is some level of skill, which makes me think this card's okay for now. But if we start to see it kind of snowballing out of control, which I don't think it's there yet, but if we start to see it being included in more decks than, say, Ziliax, that's when I think, you know, that's a red flag for me.
I'm really glad you brought up Ziliax, because, you know, over Hearthstone's history, there have been cards that they have specifically targeted and given the reason for, the reason being that they are included in too many decks. Mm-hmm. Like the first, to me, I think of Azure Drake as the poster child, because this was a card that just got included in so many decks until it was retired to the Hall of Fame. Like, regardless of whether you were interested in Dragon Synergy or anything, you just like, oh, it's a decent body and I draw a card. Cool.
Yeah, or even spell power. Spell power wasn't even taken into consideration a lot of the time. It's like, I have no spells in my deck, but I still have Azure Drakes.
Yeah. And yet it still ended up, the spell power would play a role because it was on the card, and a lot of classes would roll spells. So, but at the same time, you've got Ziliax, a card that has seen just a ton of inclusion since it came to the game, and it hasn't been messed with. So again, kind of like Zephrys, like, where do they draw the line? Like, clearly there's a line that they draw as well for too much inclusion, and I think it's okay if a card is seeing a lot of inclusion, as much, if not more, than Azure Drake ever had. If its effect on the game is healthy enough. I'm going to use the word healthy, because there's, you know, powerful is one thing, and clearly Zephrys is powerful, so is Ziliax. But overall health, overall fairness, also its ability to be used across most classes, which again, Azure Drake falls into that too, but it was very ubiquitous, and it was also like really generic in the way that it functioned, whereas I don't think Zephrys is. I would think, maybe, you know, I think Ziliax is way more kind of generic in what it is. It's removal and heal for every class in the game. That's what Ziliax brings. But Zephrys just has such a huge effect and so many possible outcomes that I find it really interesting. So I think a lot of it is kind of a gut feeling. And I haven't really heard this talked about since Broad and I'm going to say Broad and Co, because it wasn't just Ben Broad that left Team 5. It was multiple, like, kind of original forward-facing developers on Team 5 that kind of left around the same time. But, you know, back in those days, they more than once mentioned that feeling was a factor in the changes they decided to make to cards. And I'm not saying that just because they haven't mentioned it, that's not still a thing. I am sure it is still very, very, very much a thing. And I just want to bring it back up again here and say that for me, Zephrys feels good. I like the card. It doesn't feel busted. It's always in the back of my head. And I can't put my finger on why this card is okay and Dr. Boom drives me nuts. But because what I'm about to say is when I'm playing games right now and Zephrys is always in the back of my head, it feels era-like, because in 2 years Zephrys will be in Wild, and in Standard that'll no longer be a thought in the back of my head, and I'm going to think back to the days when, hey guys, you remember when we were all playing around Zephrys and trying to figure out the turn when my opponent would play it, when that would suck the most for me? Mm-hmm. And Dr. Boom certainly, Mad Genius is a card that when it is gone, like that's an era-defining card as well. But that for whatever reason, that's a card that tilts me more. And Zephrys, I think because we could all use it to varying degrees for various different reasons, I find it wildly interesting, and I really like it.
I do find it interesting. The thing that's the flag for me, I think, more than anything else, is the fact that you don't necessarily have to build a singleton deck to use him. And like I mentioned before, you still do have to kind of build around him in a way, because you do want to either, like, you're planning for the late game or you're trying to draw through your whole deck. So there are still some ways that, you need to activate him. But it kind of brings me back to the conversation that we had when we were talking about how we thought Bomb Warrior was going to be a real big problem for Highlander style decks, and how we thought that those Highlander decks would just not see any play, because as soon as you put duplicate bombs, then you totally ruin the build around condition. So, I mean, I kind of come back to that conversation, and I start to think that, like, if you just changed all of the Highlander cards to say, if you start the game with no duplicates in your deck, then this happens, whatever the effect is, then the card becomes active. And I feel like that would kind of fix my biggest problem with Zephrys, the fact that he's included in decks that aren't singleton decks or aren't Highlander decks. That's part of the problem to me, because that's supposed to be his build around condition. And I think that if people are feeling like he's in, every deck and every class is playing him and all the rest of it, then like maybe the fix just is changing the language on the Highlander cards so that your build around deck condition is actually enforced at the start of the game, and you don't, lose your Reno, lose your Zephrys, whatever, when you have duplicates. I mean, that I do kind of like the build around play style where you do include duplicates and find ways to make him work late game. I do think that's cool. But if he does start to show up too often and he is, pulling wins out of his butt, then yeah, maybe it's something that could be looked at. And I think that, it would kind of stealth nerf Zephrys while also kind of buffing the other Highlander decks. Even though Bomb Warrior isn't nearly as prevalent as it was, you can still mess with that kind of style of deck. So I think that's kind of where I land, that maybe changing the language on Highlander cards in general is the thing that could bring him back to where he's supposed to be played, which is Highlander decks.
I disagree with everything you just said.
Okay.
Yeah. I really like that it doesn't have to be a Highlander deck. Like, that's what I say. Like, I like that play style too. I like the idea where you can put him in a deck that has duplicates, like the Paladin. Well, then
deck.
I was just a denizen of the internet, and all I did was focus on what you said that I didn't like.
Yeah, but that's what I say. Like, right now in this moment, I think that's a cool play style, and I'm glad that strategy exists. But if it gets to the point where we're all super annoyed, I think changing the text on all the Highlander cards might be a way to change Zephrys without actually changing the heart of the card. No, the soul of the card.
The Ghost of Broad hangs heavily over this conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just overall just like the card. I think it's really clever that we can find ways to make them work outside of Highlander. And also, like, to me, the most egregious offender is Murloc Paladin and Prismatic Lens. Frankly, I'll be surprised if we get to the standard rotation and it doesn't get under or unbuffed or dealt with in some way, shape, or form. But also, it'll be off to Wild come next year. So there's also that to keep in the back, very back of our minds. But yeah, it's also funny how, like, when we have these hypothetical conversations about Hearthstone, it's like, there's also, who knows, things might happen that we don't even see coming, because I didn't see card buffs coming this year, and it really changed the game. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see. So anyways, keep those emails coming. tacpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you, Slippery Joe. And thank you, everybody who voted in our poll. Before we get into this week's Hearthstone news, that's right. That's how long that top of the show conversation just took. We have a sponsor to thank today, and it's Harry's. If you're unfamiliar with Harry's fine razors and shaving products, you can check them out over at harrys.com/TAC. Jocelyn, we've been sponsored by Harry's for a while.
They might have been our first ever sponsor.
I think you might be right. Anyways, they're definitely our longest running, like without a doubt. But I have an admission to make. I was a dummy, and I misplaced my last stack of refills, my razor replacements. So I kind of had to make do, and so I spent like a week without my Harry's razors, and I forgot just how much smoother my Harry's razors keep my neck. I have quite the neck beard if I don't keep it in check. Compared to like my electric razor, it was kind of sad. Like, I really missed them. Crisis averted though. I did find my refills. They were under a sink avalanche. But it was one of those ones where it was like, oh, that more or less looks like how I, Garrett, stack things. So I didn't think to check there. And yeah, I'm dumb. But it's wonderful. It's wonderful. After going a week without it, like lathering up and getting a fresh blade out and like, and it didn't cost me an arm and a leg because they're really well priced. Big fan. You can join the 10 million who have tried Harry's and claim your special trial offer by going to harrys.com/TAC. Listeners of TAC, you can redeem that trial set over at harrys.com/TAC, and you will get a weighted ergonomic handle for a firm grip, a 5-blade razor with a lubricating strip and trimmer blade, their rich lathering shave gel with aloe in it to keep your skin hydrated. It smells so good. It smells
so good.
And like, I know I live in a swamp and there's humidity everywhere, but the hydration is still a good thing. I love it. And you get a travel blade cover to keep your razor dry and keep things easy on the go. Head on over to harrys.com/TAC to start shaving better today. We thank them for their support, and we thank you for checking out Harry's. With that said, Joss, it is now time to talk this week's Hearthstone news.
Good news, everyone!
Did you play this week's Brawl, Jocelyn? Because the team,
I did.
The Brawl team is just knocking it out of the park. I had so much fun with this Brawl.
Yeah, they're doing a really, really good job. They're getting me interested in Brawl again, and I was not interested in Brawl for a good, 2 years. I just kind of ignored it.
We took our Brawl spinoff show out back and just buried it. It was done. It was the end of that. And but that's fine. We can talk about it here. It was League of Explorers Revived, and it's like a prelude, a prequel, one might say, to Tombs of Terror, the upcoming single player. Again, giving away codes. Don't forget, folks. And I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. Like Hearthstone is getting really good at its storytelling. If you're into that kind of thing, it's really fun. Like I already the first time I was really impressed with Hearthstone's writing was the Frozen Throne single player, because the jokes were just legitimately funny if you were a Warcraft fan, and especially if you rated Ice Crown, which I did back in the day. It was legitimately funny. I could tell there were a lot of in jokes going on, and they clearly spent some time kind of crafting that experience. But they've delivered on something I was really skeptical about, or maybe not skeptical, but kind of indifferent about. Like when they said, "Oh, we're going to tell a story across the whole year," I'm like, "That's fine. Just show me the cards."
That was skeptical is a really good word for that, because I was 100% skeptical when it came to their storytelling, because it's something we haven't really seen in Hearthstone, right? And it's difficult to do in a card game, because in any other of Blizzard's games, you can actually you're moving through a space, you're taking quests, you're being told a story as you move through, and Hearthstone doesn't really have that kind of momentum, I'll call it, because it's basically expansion, card drop, boom, right? How do you tell a story when you're not really progressing through that expansion? And it turns out making single player content and tying it together with brawls is a really good way to do that, because I was kind of wondering when they started talking about Tombs of Terror, I was like, okay, well, how does this like tie in? Like, why are they going to Oldham at all? Like, what's actually going on? How did the League of Explorers, like, where did they go? How did they come back together? Were they ever apart? Like, there were just so many gaps when we saw the Saviors of Oldham trailer, and it was like, Dalaran is flying to Oldham for some reason because, I don't know, rockets. Like, it seemed like a kind of disjointed story. And I think this is a little bit of the problem with like outside of game announcements and then like in-game content, right? Because you're just like, I don't get this until you do get it when they actually put things like this Brawl out. It told a really, really interesting and good story, and I liked the way that they did it, although I totally messed up my run completely. But
Oh no.
Yeah,
I thought I was
I
doomed
did.
at Reno. Like the first few turns, Reno gave me a really hard time. I was able to, pull it out of the out of the dumpster, but like I was like going along having a good time. I'm like, oh, this is clever. Oh, it's like a greatest hits of all the kind of like wonky things they've done in dungeon runs and single players and brawls. But then I got to Reno. I'm like, oh, this is like legitimately like kind of giving me a little bit of a hard time. I'm not just rolling over this. Oh, never mind. I figured it out. We're good.
Yeah.
It took a minute. But,
For me, it was when I got offered my treasure, I chose, or not my treasure, when I got offered like my passive effect and you're right before the end boss, I was like, oh yeah, death rattles triggered twice. That would be so good. I've picked so many cards with death rattles. This is going to work perfectly. Except I had Astral Tiger in my deck, so then it triggered twice and put duplicates in, and then so I couldn't use my Explorers because my deck had like 35 cards and they were all those freaking tigers.
oh no!
I lost.
But
Very badly.
imagine this is actually Tombs of Terror, and you were somehow able to construct a mill deck. Now you
Somehow.
step 5 profit. I don't know what steps 1 through 4 are, but step 5 is profit.
Yeah. Steps 1 through 4 were just Joss loses.
Yeah, I found that because the Astral Tiger was one of the starter cards in the deck.
It is, yeah, it's a starter card.
And it helped me. It helped me a lot. There were a lot of times where I was very thankful for it. I'm like, oh, sweet, another 3/5. I just need a body.
Yeah.
Here we go. But I can see that being a little problematic. You're just sitting there going, I need anything but an Astral Tiger. Off the top, Astral Tiger.
And then like I had so many things that like were treant related, but then I would never actually find like my Force of Nature or my whatever the 8-mana one is called, the twin spell. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but like the ones that make treants, I was like, where are these cards? Because I had my Mulch Muncher, I had my like turn your treants into 5/5s or whatever, dude, and I just couldn't find them. I couldn't find treants. So yeah.
This also seemed to be a bit of a preview for Tombs of Terror, because Elise did count as a druid / priest. Now she had the druid hero power, not the priest hero power. There was no choice to get the other hero power. But we did, since it was a mini dungeon run, essentially, we did get to pick from like I hesitate to use the word buckets, but that's where my brain keeps wanting to go. But that's an arena specific term. But like these selections of cards, let's call them curated card pools or chunks. I don't know.
I think buckets is just better, but that's me.
Yeah, let's whatever. Dungeon
just
run
call them
buckets. Dungeon buckets. The ducats.
It's not a thing.
No, it's not. I believe you were right, because you and I were kind of guessing to the best of our ability last week if the cards that were going to be offered, since we were going with this split class mentality, were going to be like say, at least for example, is Druid Priest. If your options are going to be like every one is a mix of both, which is what I thought it was going to be, and you're like, no, I think it's going to be one option will be Priest, one option will be Druid, one option will be Priest. Maybe the next one will be Druid, Priest, Druid. And that's how it was in this brawl. So hashtag Joss was right.
Yep. And I think it's okay. Because I think it's easier to find and create synergies within a class than it is to try to combine two classes together. I think you're the one as the player who's supposed to make that leap and construct the deck in a way that works well together. And I think it's like another piece of the deck building puzzle, right? They don't necessarily want to just solve it for you and say like, oh, here's all the highest damage spells from the two classes you're playing in one bucket or something. Like, it made you make real choices, which I did think was really interesting. So I'm kind of glad. At first I thought, oh man, this is going to suck. And I don't really want like mix up the buckets, do that. But I think this actually, after playing it, after having my hands on it, I think that this mode, like this way that they chose to create the buckets, I think is actually better and will make for more interesting deck combinations because you're the one making the choices.
Right. And like maybe there's who knows, maybe they do mix it up later on, but the more I think about it, like putting the onus on you to think of really cool combinations of class cards to make, I think is probably for the best, rather than
exactly.
Kind of
not to mention
you.
They would have already had most of the buckets already created, I would think, right? So it's another way to reuse things they've done in the past. I'm assuming that they already have all these things put together from their previous dungeon runs using those classes, so they can just kind of copy paste as opposed to trying to make up all new buckets for all of these dual classes. I said tri classes. I was like, no, there's just two. Come on, Joss.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyways, I'm legitimately excited. I know we have like another brawl coming up, which it's the Zephrys one, which I'm really anxious to see how that's going to play out. But since it's not more kind of like mini dungeon runs, like I think my hype for brawls, like this is what I was more excited for. Like I'm sure the Zephrys one will be fun. But I'm ready for single player again. Bring it on.
Yeah.
So with that said, let's talk about Grandmasters because we talked a little bit about it at the top of the show, but as I mentioned, this is the most Grandmasters I have been watching all year. I'm just really liking it. I'm really liking it. Jocelyn, I got like weirdly passionate about Zelay's win rate this weekend because he started to come back. He did not start the season 2 off in the best of fashion. And then it was looking like, oh man, he's on the upswing, and it still technically is. Like he picked up 2 wins. He did lose another set, but dude is just outside of the top 4 in his group. And
yeah, I think that whole entire group, all 4 of the players are 2 and 4 are basically tied for 5th, right? I mean, obviously they do have tiebreakers, so we actually have a ranking system outside of just wins and losses. But yeah, there are 4 players in his group that are now at 2 and 4 records. So
yeah,
he's technically tied for 5th, but I'm not sure exactly how his tiebreakers shake out.
Right, which is pretty common. Also, I mean, it's still pretty early. We still have many more weeks left. It's just 7 weeks, so we're like as close to halfway through as we could be because it's an uneven amount of weeks.
Yeah, and I think next week is the week where they will now have played everybody else in their division. So that kind of is an interesting flex point for me. Like once you've seen everybody once, then what does the back half of the season look like? That's where I'm excited to see like how they change it up over, the first time they face their opponents. So I like this time, this second back half of the Grandmasters season. And you're right, I missed this weekend. Unfortunately, I was working a DreamHack event in Montreal, but I was able to catch some of Zelay's matches. And man, just Grandmasters in general, I find so much more interesting as Conquest, just because, less mirror matches and more interesting decks in general, I think.
Yeah, it's more frequent shakeups in the matchups, which
makes for a more interesting Hearthstone, personally. But
I just like it better.
And honestly, so Ben plays Hearthstone in the chat room. I find this so funny too, is Zelay watching him play, because if you guys aren't aware, he has a back injury. So he's literally like lounging on a couch because he can't like sit up straight because of his back. But it looks like he's just like, I'm not taking this seriously. I'm just going to lounge a little, whatevs. And he seems so super casual, but there is a reason why he's laying on the couch instead of sitting up at his computer. And I find it so funny.
Yeah. I turned it on one night, while I'm, it's a good thing to put on while I'm trying to fall asleep, put on the VOD. And then Katie's next to me and she just goes, why is that one guy just laying down? I'm like, that's a lay. He hurt his back.
He's super chill.
He was awesome. We had him on the show, and he hurt his back. So, he's also just chill dude. Like it just to me, Zalay in a reclined position is just a visual representation of how I file him away in my brain.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a good time. By the way, Hunter Ace on just another tear. I think he dropped one game in his first matchup this season, and then going into this week was on like a 12-game winning streak, and then he continued it into this weekend. Like, dude, he's just nuts.
I know. I don't understand how his brain works. It just, I feel like he just must daydream and just everything about Hearthstone. It just must be Hearthstone cards in his head just all the time.
I'm just
I don't know how that kid is just like a prodigy, 100%.
I am selfishly thankful for his performance so that I can always just point to him and go, oh, Magic players who think that Hearthstone is just a bunch of RNG nonsense. Here you go. There's Hunter. Why is Hunter Ace so consistent? If like, and even in like Conquest best of 5 or best of 3, where we're like, oh, you know, it's we could probably use another game, but also the games are long enough. Like, to get that kind of consistency it's impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's very, very impressive. And I mean, he won you all those packs at the finals last year, right? So he's always going to be your real favorite player. I know.
The finals this year, technically.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. We won't get into that argument again.
No, I don't care. I don't care. Do you think, never mind. Maybe next week's top of the show topic can be, do you think Grandmasters will even still be around next year? I've seen some folks batting that around on Twitter, and I find it interesting, but we have enough.
We have enough to talk about.
Yeah. I also really enjoyed just Zoolock this weekend. It seemed to be kind of the X factor for quite a few players. We're going to talk about Zoolock, by the way, in strategy, and I don't know how long it's been since we've talked to Zoo in a strategy segment on the Angry Chicken, but it has been long enough. So we're going to do it. But while we're on the subject of Grandmasters and just kind of watching esports in general, Jocelyn, you thought it'd be a good time to kind of come back around to Twitch drops and remind folks that you should be paying attention to this and getting yourself free cards.
Exactly. So they actually announced, I believe, 4 or 5 days ago now on the main Hearthstone Twitter, they announced that all of the rest of season 2 and the playoffs are actually going to have drops enabled, which means you can watch the Grandmasters League and get free packs, which, yay, free packs. So I thought it would be a good idea to just remind you guys how you actually do get Twitch drops. So first of all, you have to make sure that you're logged into your Twitch account and that your Twitch account is tied to whatever like third-party website it is that you need to tie it to in order to be eligible for drops. So you're kind of like registering with Blizzard to tell them like, yes, please, I would like to link my accounts. And the really big thing is that Twitch has changed what actually counts as a viewer. They did this a couple years back now. I believe it was right around the time that the affiliate program got brought in, and they added like the quests, the things that you had to complete, the requirements you had to meet to become an affiliate and a partner. They changed what a viewer on Twitch actually is. So it used to be that if you had the tab muted, if you had the video muted, or if you had the tab out of focus, so if it was minimized or if it was in the background of Chrome or whatever, you didn't count as a Twitch viewer. Some of those things have changed. They've kind of walked it back a little bit. Chrome has added some updates that have changed the way that it deals with background tabs and things. So now it seems like most of these things are resolved. But if you have a Twitch tab open, if you have a stream open and you mute it in the video, you no longer count as a viewer, which means you're no longer eligible to get a drop from that stream. So make sure you're muting if you have it open in the background or whatever, and you don't actually want to hear the commentary. Don't mute the Twitch stream. Either mute your browser tab or mute like your speakers, like turn your speakers off or something, like your hardware. And then that way you'll still get your drops.
Or if you're like me and you have 17 and a half different audio devices plugged into your computer, just throw them in one that you're not using, and you can keep leveling up in Classic or whatever it is that you need to hear.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But the point is, if you actually mute Twitch in the actual Twitch stream video, like the little speaker, if that has an X in it, then you are no longer eligible to get Twitch drops. So just make sure that you're logged into your Twitch account and make sure it's tied to Blizzard, and then make sure that you're not using that little, you can turn the volume like all the way down in your Twitch player. Just make sure you're not actually muting the stream.
But, why would you want to do that? You should listen to the stream because you might learn something.
You never know. You never know.
Might just be that the little animal print shirts that the casters were wearing this weekend were kind of fabulous, and I want to know who makes them because they were very fun.
You should tweet at them. I'm sure they tell you.
I've been talking to a certain caster that I know a lot of people are fans of about coming on the show. We're locking in a date soon, and that's why I'm being coy. Nothing is locked in yet. But before we get into strategy and talk about Zulak, we have one more sponsor to thank today, and that is Away Travel. This episode of The Angry Chicken is sponsored by Away Luggage. You can go check them out over at awaytravel.com/TAC20. You're going to get some just awesome luggage, and you're also going to get $20 off your order with the checkout code TAC20. So go check them out. If you're unfamiliar, Jocelyn, you and I both have Away Luggage at this point. We do a little bit of traveling. There's
I do a lot of traveling now.
Yeah. This year's been actually pretty travel light for me. Your wedding was the only thing I had to fly to so far, but next month all bets are off. I'm gonna do a year's worth of traveling in like 30 days.
It's going to get intense. Plus, we have BlizzCon coming up, which is super exciting. So we'll both be traveling to California. Turns out Away Luggage works great in the snow and also the sun.
Yes. And it literally goes from an actual swamp where the air is water in Florida to the frozen tundra north of the wall that is Toronto to the arid desert masquerading as a beach of Southern California. And it's fine. I've had no issues with my wheels. It's in really good condition. I throw that sucker around too. I've got a hatchback, and I swear to God, I open that hatch and I see how far away from my car I can get to lunge my luggage into it. I'm over exaggerating, but I throw that sucker in the back of the car constantly. So.
I was going to say, it seems like you're making things harder on yourself if you're opening the back of your car.
You say making things harder.
Away.
I say having more fun. If you're not risking scratching your car's paint by chucking luggage into the hatch of your car, what are you really doing with your life?
I don't know, Garrett. I don't know.
They're fantastic. You should go check them out. Big fan of the optional ejectable battery in both sizes of their carry-ons. There's yet another Zelda coming out for Nintendo Switch, which means I'm going to be using that battery up a lot in a lot of my travels. Coming up, there's also a new Pokemon. There's also Hearthstone on your phone, and I don't know about you, but I'm an Apple user, which means my battery is never charged. So I'm thankful for that ejectable battery. So go check them out. There's also like a 100-day trial. You can literally travel with it, see if you like it. There's also a lifetime warranty on top of all of this. You get $20 off a suitcase when you go to awaytravel.com/TAC20 and use the promo code TAC20 during checkout. Now, let's bring it back to the launch of Hearthstone and talk about Zulak.
Hit it very hard.
Wanna blow something up? Time to pay!
Except Zulak looks very different than it did many years ago, and also just it looks very different than it does every expansion because it always comes back. If you've been not paying attention or you're not one of these folks that's more interested in the overarching history of Hearthstone, Zulak almost always comes back at the start of every expansion. It's just an affordable, kind of reliable strategy to fall back on and try and eke in some wins. And there's almost always some new cards that come up with an expansion that you just look at and go, oh, right, Zoo. However, not only is it sticking around longer than usual here in Saviors of Oldham, it's getting play in Grandmasters and made some serious waves this past week. Again, I watched quite a few of Zalae's games because I was like, oh, dude's mounting a comeback. I want to see these games. And Zulak played a big role in that. And I just found it fascinating that this archetype is still around and still working on this level.
Yeah, and the biggest thing you mentioned, I think, is that it's affordable. It's a kind of style of deck that is probably always going to be around in Hearthstone. It makes use of a lot of basic classic cards, but it also has changed a little bit over the years as we've gotten different kind of packages to put into this zoo kind of skeleton. And It's still pretty affordable. There's a couple of pieces here. A couple of the newer cards are epics as opposed to rares and commons. There's also Solarium, which is normally an inclusion in Zoolock, which is it's a legendary. So it's a little bit more expensive now than it has been previously, but I still think it's definitely one of the most affordable decks right now when it comes to dust cost.
Yeah, I mean, part of that too, if you're thinking about like the current meta and just Saviors of Oblivion in general, is like Highlander decks are back, and those are traditionally kind of expensive because there's just so much room
There's
to
so many,
experiment. Usually, a lot of legendaries, a lot of epics, find homes. So even though you're absolutely right, multiple legendaries have popped into multiple Zoolock lists. We're still talking like in most cases 3. I think the worst case scenario is 3 in one of the more popular versions for ladder right now. If you're watching the video version, we have up Zephrys deck list. This is what he took to Grandmasters this past weekend. Actually knocked out a Quest Shaman with it. I would highly recommend, if you want to see this list in action, checking out game 2 of Zephrys versus PNC. Really interesting and also cool to kind of see a really good example of how Zoolock can throw down.
Yeah, I watched that game as well on your recommendation, and I actually agree with Zalae's thoughts afterwards. Is PNC did draw really, really poorly and wasn't able to kind of play the style he should have played in order to be able to beat the Zoolock, and Zalae did draw really, really well. But you're right. I think the strength of Zoolock is, that early game, the kind of flooding and fighting for the board with your minions sort of style of play. And there's a lot of cards that fit into that archetype right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't seem set in stone if looking at, community websites and community deck lists is anything to go by. There are a lot of different variations on Zoolock kind of going around right now. But that excites me. Depending on how,
I mean, even today, like we're talking about Zoolock, but we've got 2 different kind of boards two different builds to talk about right now. Like we've got Zalae's style, and then we've got another one for ladder. Like they're similar, but there's still a lot of differences here.
Yeah. We're going to kind of be going back and forth between a list, kind of a more ladder popular list on HS Replay and Zalae's build. And kind of the major differences between these two is that Zalae's list seems a little more interested in buffs. It also seems like a little more, I almost call it like pure. It's just like, no, Zoo just builds the board and then uses the board to control the board if it has to, or go face depending on the state of the game, if you are now the beatdown, so on and so forth. Whereas a lot of the popular ladder Zoo lists are all about the magic carpet.
Yeah, and I don't love the magic carpet build, I'll be honest. I prefer the buff build.
I do too. Now both lists, like almost all archetypes, have certain ways to buff their cards. But yeah, I think there's an over-reliance on magic carpet, and I think the stats back me up. Like in most Zoo lists, if you look at them on HS Replay, the played win rate on magic carpet is the lowest of any card in the entire list. That isn't to say that
magic carpet can be hard sometimes to get it on the board. Like there are some times, and I have played against Zoo players that have this happen, so I know that it's a thing. It can happen. Sometimes you get that card down and you have the hand to back it up, and it just goes nuts. But I find more often than not, I'm stuck with, a magic carpet that I might want to throw down, but then no minions to go with because I don't have any 1-cost minions. The Lackeys are supposed to help that, but sometimes it just doesn't line up properly. I find the magic carpet to be probably the hardest card to actually make use of in the deck. And when it goes off, it goes off. Like the card is nuts. But I find getting those moments is really, really difficult versus like a Serpent Egg and a Grim Rally play. Like that's something that I find to be way, way more consistent.
Or just Evil Recruiter.
Yeah, Recruiter too.
Just put big stats on the board earlier than you should be able to.
Yeah.
It's all these kind of things. Now, granted, Evil Recruiter, you got to have something on the board to recruit, but it's still fighting in that slot. It's in that mana cost for the magic carpet. I get the attraction. I mean, it's sticky as hell. 6 health on a 3 mana minion is really sticky in a deck that has a lot of cheap minions and can take advantage of magic carpet's effect. It's just that there's so many other crazy things that Zulok has access to and can tap into and can do with its 3 mana.
Mm-hmm.
And or 3+ if you're doing a same turn kind of combo. And then so that's why I really like Zalae's list. It's more of an interest in those buffs. It's got the the Grim Rally. It's got the Serpent Egg, which you mentioned. There's no Beaming Sidekick, which is also a popular inclusion across a lot of different kind of ladder lists I've seen for Zulok. He has put in a 1 of Abusive Sergeant, which I love because if you can. Your Zoo, you're probably going to get minions to stick to board, and Abusive Sergeant, especially if you combine it with if you get a Knife Juggler to stick and then something else that you're making a trade with, especially if that something else is Mecharoo and it's going to leave a body behind after it gets buffed up by the Abusive Sergeant to make a trade and also get additional knife value. There's just so many ways that you can start to build or make your snowball larger with Zalae's list.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I just find Zalae's list more fun to play. It's just a more fun play style. I find it easier than the Magic Carpet build. And I also find it more threatening, I guess, when you can get off a big Grim Rally, or you can kill one of those things like your Serpent Eggs, like your Joey bot thing, whatever. What is it? Shoot.
Well, the Joey bot is what comes out of the Mecharoo.
Yeah, this is what comes out. Yeah,
I love that you remember the name of the token, but not the card.
I don't know, but yeah, especially if it is one of those things that's going to leave something behind after you kill it. It's a cool kind of gameplay. Killing your own minions to make your whole board better and decide making those decisions of what the best thing is. Do you want to kill the thing with the Death Rattle that's kind of also an AoE protection, or do you kill one of your lackeys when maybe you could hang on to it and use it in a different way later on? There's a lot of decisions, I think, to be made on how to build the actual strongest board, especially when you're in a meta like we are right now, particularly with the Shaman deck that has access to the mind control tech, right? Generally, Zoo's just Spleh! But playing around that might be something that you want to consider. So I think there's a lot more choices and a lot more thought that goes into Zoo than some people tend to give it credit for.
I absolutely agree, especially if we're looking at kind of the popular or the effective aggro options right now. If we're looking at Murlocs, I've logged a lot of Murloc games, both Paladin and Shaman, since Uldum has come out, and the games tend to play out the same, especially Paladin.
Mm-hmm.
Shaman, you get a decent amount of variance, but Zulok, game to game, it plays out so differently because of all of the different combinations you can pull off, depending on what state you find yourself in. I really think it's the thinking man's aggressive deck list right now in this Saviors of Uldum meta that we find ourselves in. But let's stop talking about the differences between kind of Zalae's list and what's popular on ladder. Let's talk about what is absolutely the same between every Zoo list you're going to pull right now, and that is the Lackey package. Basically, every Zoo list that is worth playing is running Sinister Deal, Evil Cable Rat, Evil Genius, and Evil Recruiter. And I think it's also could be argued that Grim Rally is a part of the Lackey package because Lackeys can help that go. And if Grim Rally is part of it, then if we're looking at Zalae's list, so is Serpent Egg. It's also kind of part of all this.
Yeah, because you do want the ability to kill something with both Grim Rally and with the Genius, right? So being able to actually kill something is really, really important.
Yes.
Did I get the right card? Was I thinking of the right card? Yes, Evil Genius. Yeah, destroyed the friendly minion to get 2 Lackeys. Yeah, so yes. Where you need to destroy things, that's when you start to think about, well, what else? What do I want to destroy? And what you want to destroy is either Lackeys, though if you're going to try to curve into the Recruiter, then you don't want to be destroying your Lackeys, which means you would need another target. And if you need another target, that's when you're looking for things like the Egg and things like even possibly Mecharoo. So it's funny, I would call things like the Egg and Mecharoo almost like the bridge between the Lackey package and the rest of your deck. It's like they're not Lackeys in and of themselves. They're kind of part of the package, but not really. They're like the glue that holds the deck together, right? That holds the Lackey package in your zoo deck.
It's because of the genius, because you have to, because part of your Lackey generation is
just
behind this
things.
wall of sacrificing. You have to, you kind of think about it in that way. Absolutely. And also because of the potential for board buffing, and you know, we're focusing on Zalae's list. So Grim Rally is kind of the big star there for board buffing. But other lists run Direwolf. Like that's another way. And so if you can find ways, but I like ways that add health, especially with something like a Mekaru, because then I can maybe make a trade with it, have 1 health left behind, and then feel better about sacrificing it, then getting the token out of it. And I already mentioned my love with Knife Juggler and anything Mekaru related, so I'm not going to retread that. But there's just so many fun combos, and while playing this, I felt like I was viewing the Matrix at certain points. So just lots of different avenues to go down. So to kind of talk about, you know, your more standard kind of deck guide things, what you're looking for in your mulligan. I mean, it has Flame Imp, it has Crystallizer. Try and start the game with those cards if you can. If you know you're playing against an aggressive deck, keep that Voidwalker or see if you can't find one. If you know you're going against a slow deck, we haven't talked about Diseased Vulture yet. This is a card we were very excited about, and rightfully so. It is in most zoo lists right now, and if you know you're going to be going against a slower deck, you should probably consider keeping your Diseased Vulture. It actually has a surprisingly high mulligan win rate. Looking over at HS3
this card is pretty gross. The first time I actually saw this combined with the Neferset Thrasher, which is the one that when you play it and attack with it, then it deals damage to your hero. I think 3 damage to your hero. And that combined with like every time you're getting 4 attack in, whether that's on a minion or on your opponent's face, either way, then you're also summoning a 3-cost minion. Plus, you've got the Diseased Vulture on the board as well. So it just it snowballs so quickly when you get these two working together.
Yeah, and it's one of the more obvious power spikes in the game as well. The Crystallizer is a really like obvious combo. Your freaking hero power hurts you, so why not?
Yeah,
there's lots of ways to trigger your Diseased Vulture. We pretty much already mentioned most of the other kind of obvious combos and power spikes. Your Grim Rally plus the Egg, Mekaru, and Knife Juggler on board, plus like anything else. It's like if you end up with those 2 minions on board, especially if the Mekaru can attack, it really opens up the door for a lot of different plays. I got 2 Diseased Vultures on the board at the same time this week. That was just silly.
Whoa.
Like, good Lord. And I had a Crystallizer in hand. So it was like same turn, second Diseased Vulture down, Crystallizer, bam, 2-3 drops. It was wonderful.
Gross.
Flexing out of Zalae's list, there are also popular lists running to Khan. If you're running to Khan, if you're turning your Lackeys into 4/4s for the rest of the game, clearly that's a big power spike as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's what got me in the brawl against that Warlock. It was the 4/4 Lackeys, man. They're just so hard to clear.
Yeah.
They're just enough that they feel like they're going to, well, it's very similar to Quest Rogue, right? Like, or I get old Quest Rogue. Which iteration of Quest Rogue are we on now? But anyways.
I've been pushing back against that because like Quest Rogue was just like any minion that you probably put in your deck is now better than it was before, or you built this deck wrong. Whereas,
yes, true. It's and Lackeys. Yeah, the effect is restricted to Lackeys, but still just having very, very cheap 4/4 minions ends up kind of being a super, super power spike, assuming that you still have Lackeys either on board or in your hand, right? So
yeah. And then as far as matchups are concerned, it's really, really strong against most popular quest decks that are out there right now, especially Paladin Druid. And like, if you're seeing Rogue, apparently, like I was checking out stats, I've not been seeing Quest Rogue.
No, I haven't seen Quest Rogue either, actually.
No, but
I did like right off the start of the expansion, but I haven't seen them very often since then. And I think Quest Shaman, go ahead.
I think I saw like every quest class.
Yeah, everyone was messing around with the quest to see how good they were. But Quest Shaman, I think, is the one that's the closest potential matchup. And I think Out of the three, I have four if you want to include Rogue, but out of Paladin, Druid, Shaman, Rogue, in terms of quest decks, Shaman is definitely the one I see more often.
Yes, I same as well. And last I looked at like games played over on something like HS Replay, it seemed to confirm that was the most popular quest deck. Although Druid Paladin really popular as well. But Quest Paladin, Quest Druid, you're going to do very well against this. You're definitely favored. But this is where this is where kind of the problem for Zoo comes in. It's pretty fair other than that. Even the other matchups that you're favored in, as far as win rates are concerned, they're around the 55% mark. It's over 50%, but not that much higher. These are things like Highlander Hunter, most mages, Murloc Paladin, Murloc Shaman, Commodore Priest. You are going to be technically favored with most Zulok lists, but it's not like a 60-40. You're looking more at like a 55. And that it means it's going to be a more difficult climb, but you absolutely can. Like, it's still competitively viable on ladder. And as we mentioned at the top of this, again, it's important to reiterate that this is a dust affordable list.
Yeah, and I think the 55 win rate mark is really interesting because I do feel like if you understand the matchup, then you're going to be able to win it more often than you lose it with some of these style of decks. So sometimes your opponent is just going to draw like the perfect thing. But in general, if you understand the matchup and you understand what you need to be mulliganing for against specific decks and, what you need to hold on to and when you need to play it and things like that, then I think you're going to push that win rate higher than the 55 mark. Because I think, that generally is how really close matchups work is, whoever understands the matchup better and isn't just trying to execute the same game plan game after game after game, regardless of opponent, is going to do better. So like specifically Combo Priest, watching Zalay play against Combo Priests in Grandmasters as well, it was just kind of like, it was a matchup that I thought he would probably lose, but then it's like, well, his opponent didn't draw the greatest, but also he ended up with some really lucky juggles and lackey generations, but, was able to, put up a taunt against Combo Priest, which immediately is going to be a pain in the butt for them. So, maybe you save your Void Walkers and you don't necessarily throw it down until there's a minion that they put down you can't deal with. Well, one minion on the other side of the board isn't the end of the world if you've got a taunt or two in the way. So, maybe picking those Titanic Lackeys or, going with the stalled Voidwalker play are all things that can help to tip that win rate a little bit higher into your direction away from the kind of borderline matchups.
Yeah, I love stats, obviously, because I've mentioned them every damn episode. Like, I'm a total HS Replay junkie. But I've always thought Zulok is one of those decks that, because of its accessibility, because of just how many players can play it, and also I think it's one of the more popular decks for returning players. I've always thought that we should probably take its win rate with a grain of salt, because it's almost always, you look at it and it has just like a fair win rate.
Yeah.
But I really do but this meta, especially after watching, pro players piloted over the weekend in multiple games, I really think this is a deck that if you master it, I think you're going to have a significantly higher win rate than what you're seeing on community sites.
Yeah, exactly. It is terrible against Warrior, though.
Yes, horrible. Well, it's worth it. We got 2 times of Warrior right now, Jocelyn. I mean, Control is still absolutely the most popular, but Aggro Warrior is out there, and that is almost as close of a matchup as Quest Shaman. That you're in for a game if you queue into Quest Shaman or Aggro Warrior. Also, you could also just draw really unlucky and get rolled up, but that's card games in general. So
yeah,
but yeah, Control Warrior. When we decided we were going to cover Zalay's list on today's show, and the first game when I took this deck list out for a spin, Control Warrior, and I was just like, oh no, maybe there's a chance, and then like turn 3, I'm like, there's no chance. I'm not winning this. Clearly, some people are, but yeah it wasn't me, and it wasn't that game. But Aggro Warrior was a really interesting game. I ran into a couple of them with this list. I think I won one, I lost one. But they were like total puzzles. I had fun in those games, even the one I lost.
Well, and that's kind of how you know Hearthstone's in a good place, right? When you're having fun, even when you lose, like that's a good game. That's well designed.
Yeah, and the cool thing too is because like nothing gets me saltier than like a 30-minute game where I'm like, I'm pretty sure I can win this. It's gonna take 30 minutes, but I'm gonna win, and then I lose, and then that's when I tilt, and that's why the slower meta.
That's why you like the aggro stuff. You're like,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. That's what like give me like a real thinking man's like aggro versus aggro, but it's not a mirror matchup, and I'm like, yes.
Yeah, win or lose in 10 minutes is Garrett's jam.
Do it. That is my yes, absolutely. That is my jam. So that's it's cool. So check it out. We've got links to both of the Lay's deck list and kind of this ladder build that we've been leaning into in this discussion over at amove.tv/TAC. Look for the episode 331 post. We always post our show notes. They're linked directly to the Google Docs that we use to create the show at the end of every single episode post. So go check it out. And also, Jocelyn, you wanted to put the call out.
I did, yeah, because I've really been enjoying doing the strategy section in a way that's like not necessarily just like, this is what everybody's playing. Let's talk about Control Warrior again, or, whatever. So if you guys have off meta decks that you've been playing and having a lot of fun with on ladder, please tell us what you're playing. Send us deck codes, send us lists, send us what would be awesome is if you gave us a general idea of what you're trying to do with your off meta deck. So if there's something specific that you're targeting or a play style that you're trying to do, we'll take a look at them, we'll test them out, and maybe they'll make it into a future strategy segment. So if you are part of the patron Discord, you guys can throw them up over there, or you can email the show. We are tacpodcast@gmail.com if you want to send those in.
Do it.
I feel like a chat room is saying Murloc Priest. I wouldn't even know where to begin to build a Murloc Priest. So, Carl,
hold on. I just want verification. Huh, Carl? Are you just taking two Hearthstone words and jamming them together?
That would also be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like if you're making like a quest deck work that, nobody else is doing, or, like, I don't know, just if you guys have some cool ideas that you've been running on ladder, or that you think is really close to being potentially viable, but you need some more input or whatever, send in your decks. We want to see what you guys are playing. And like I said, might make it into the strategy section of a show.
It doesn't have to be homebrewed either. Like it could be something you stumbled across that maybe just isn't as popular.
Yes.
Like one that is clearly popular because like you can find it, but it's newer, kind of rising up right now is like Highlander Warlock. Not a deck I have thought of or has been on my radar until like this past week. And I was thinking about it, but I just couldn't take my brain out of the Zalay and the other Warlock games I saw in Grandmasters. But that's another good example as well. So send them in, tacpodcast@gmail.com, or check out the Patreon Discord. Before we get into the end of the show and take an email, we do want to thank those of you supporting us on the Patreon, since we're on that subject. That's over at patreon.com/TAC. If you like the Angry Chicken, if you like what we're doing here and you want to support the show, the Patreon is the best way to do it. And we'd like to thank our most recent patrons, Cal and Ramses. Neither of you gave me a last initial. However, we are caught up, thanking our patrons. You are the most recent, and I would assume, Cal and Ramses, you know who you are. You're out there like, yeah.
You know what you've done.
Thanks. You know what you've done. You've helped us, like, pay for rent and essentials like Hearthstone cards.
Yep. 100% essentials.
Yes.
Or Tombs of Terror.
Yeah. I need as many legendaries from Uldum as I can get. If you noticed when I pulled up HS Replay on the video version, my Dark Pharaoh Takan grayed out. You know why? Don't have one.
Aw.
Don't have one.
I have almost all of them now, I think.
Wow, Josh, just rub it in, Jocelyn. You want to talk about?
Oh, yeah, you know I did that on purpose.
You want to talk about the Heroes Global Championship being dead again, even though no one brought it up except you last week? You just want to any other salt in my wounds? Anything else?
I don't do it on purpose.
Here's like a deep cut that has nothing to do with anything we've talked about. Here, remind me that the just announced Green Day Fall Out Boy Weezer tour, the closest state is Miami, and I'm gonna have to drive probably 4 hours to go see three of my all-time favorite bands headline what will surely be a way too expensive concert.
Poor you, Garrett. Poor you.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, just rub it in. Just rub it in.
Yeah.
Anyways, folks, thank you for supporting the Patreon. You get things like early access to the Angriest Chicken open signups, access to the patron-only Discord, which we just talked about. All you got to do is attach your Discord information to your Patreon account and other perks over at patreon.com/TAC. We thank you for your support. And now let's wrap the show up with an email.
Hello?
Hello, it's me.
Hello?
Just quickly, do you get my message?
Yep.
Oh,
Hello, brother.
As mentioned, tacpodcast@gmail.com or the patron Discord are where you can send your questions for the show. Marky J writes in, are you like a long-lost member of Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch? Is that what's going on here? Says, hi, Joss and Garrett. Greetings from Nowheresville, Michigan. I hope that's an actual city. I hope it is. Marky writes, I recently returned to Hearthstone after not playing since the first year of its release. Wow. All right. Marky,
It's a long time away.
Tweet at TAC Podcast. How did you find this show? I want the story. So recently returned after leaving after the first year. I've been happy with the overall balance of the game besides Boom. I strictly play fun/meme decks and enjoy targeting the decks I hate the most. Control Warrior. Ooh, Marky, you and
There's a theme there, yeah.
let's hang out. Call me.
What was this? Is this the hangout motion now?
I
This is
don't
what this
know.
means?
Just like, I like what I'm reading. I love bonding through mutual hatred. Anyway, he says there's just something about beating Dr. Boom with a cultist rogue deck that satisfies a part of my brain that no other game can. Yeah. It's very specific, so clearly no other game could satisfy that. Anyway, the reason I left shortly after Hearthstone's release was that I was a hardcore MTG player for a long time, and I hated the amount of randomness in Hearthstone that allowed casual players to beat basically anyone. That wasn't its launch. That was Yogg-Saron meta. You actually had
Puzzle box meta.
You actually had to be good at the game at launch. When Yogg-Saron was in the game, it didn't matter. You just put Yogg in your deck and hope for the best. Anyways, he continues. Years have gone by since I kicked Magic. And the way this is written is just making me laugh. And I find myself in that casual player mindset now. I appreciate the fun in randomness much more than I did in my younger years, but I still find it annoying that there isn't a more hardcore version of Hearthstone. What I want from Hearthstone is a mode where you can build 60-card decks using cards from up to 2 classes. Your hero power would be determined by the class you added the most cards from. That's interesting. If it's 50-50, you could choose which one you want. This could obviously be adjusted by the devs. I think a mode like this would attract more strategy-heavy players, such as myself, without destroying what they've already built in the main ladder mode. Maybe even locking the mode out for players until they have 2 level 30 classes. That's an interesting way to do it. What do you guys think of this idea, and do you think it would be possible for there ever to be a hardcore mode in Hearthstone, or is that the opposite of what the devs are going for? Thank you so much for taking the time to read this, and thank you for providing me with great entertainment to enjoy while I'm working long nights. So, Mark, I'm just going to say I took a little, just a little bit of issue with the tone of your email. It's a little like it should have said like Marky J, the intellectual, like I an intellectual. A little bit of this like came off a little judgy to me.
Little bit.
Like a tiny bit. Like I don't know. I've always kind of disagreed with the notion that more cards equals a more hardcore game. Like I find the limitation of only 30 cards to be something that's like really unique to Hearthstone, and also something that requires its own level of strategy and understanding about the game to understand. I don't know. To me, I think it might be more difficult to know what cards to cut than to just dump 60 cards into a deck, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think where he's coming from a Magic world, the 60 card limit kind of makes more sense because you've got lands that you have to include in Magic, right? So you have to build your mana into your deck, which you don't have to do in Hearthstone. So I think maybe 60 cards might be too many. I think obviously it's probably like the number that you're thinking of, you're used to, but in Hearthstone, I think maybe you could go with like 40 possibly, I think would probably be enough without like just filling your entire deck with a ridiculous amount of combos and stuff. Also because of the way Hearthstone works, where you can't like choose your minions to block and stuff like that you can do in Magic. So I think because of the way Hearthstone works, you don't want to play with the total number of cards in your deck too much. But I do think that there's a little bit of space to play around, and especially if you were doing, basically you're talking about the idea they're bringing in with Tombs of Terror, where you're combining classes and building a deck from those two different card pools and making that a competitive ladder mode in and of itself, which I think is a really cool idea. Because like we talked about with the buckets off the top of the show, saying that, you know, being able to find your synergies between the two classes as opposed to, you know, Blizzard kind of handing them to you on a silver platter is really interesting. And I think that if it was a mode in and of itself, there could be a whole bunch of just ridiculously broken class combinations, which could be really fun. It's like the same sort of mentality behind building Wild, right? Where, you know, anything can happen. Combos are meant to be found and are meant to be game breaking. Like that's the kind of mentality and style behind Wild. And that's kind of what this idea reminds me of, because the reason that we have the 9 discrete classes in Hearthstone is because they each have their strengths and weaknesses. And if you can take a class and shore up the weaknesses of another, then you're going to have something super powerful and broken. As long as everybody's playing with super powerful and broken, that's fine. But yeah, so I think you don't want to play too much with the size of the decks, but I do think it could be a really fun mode. But because you're doing that thing where combining classes and shoring up weaknesses, I don't actually know if that would be more hardcore and more competitive than trying to make your class work with its inherent strengths and weaknesses.
Also, are we allowing more than 2 copies of a card? Because then you're introducing a lot more variance and randomness in just your draws.
Yes, yeah.
Because that's another thought I kind of had with this. Like if they put this mode in the game, don't get me wrong, Marky, I would be in there playing it.
I feel like just generally as a rule, if you guys suggest a new Hearthstone mode, we're going to be like, yeah, do it.
I would play it.
Whatever it is, just yes, we're on board. New modes, thumbs up.
But Marky, like Marky's coming off very serious here.
Yes,
like, there's some serious thought input in this. I really like the idea of like the thought of, maybe it should be locked out until you have like 2 characters at a certain level.
Which Wild is locked out in a similar fashion, isn't it?
Is it?
I'm pretty sure, like they brought Wild in after we had already been playing the game the whole time. So whatever barrier to entry they placed didn't apply to us. But I remember when they first introduced Wild, they talked about it. And I can't remember if it's like character levels or I think it was character levels. But anyways, point is that there is currently a barrier to entry to Wild as well. When you first start playing Hearthstone on a brand new account, you go into standard.
Right. I don't remember that.
So locking the mode out for new players is definitely a thing that they do.
Anyways,
there's precedent.
Yeah, it would be interesting, but in chat room, I am aware that 2 copies would be a no-no. It would break the card collection. We're talking about something that doesn't exist. So while we're in here having a hypothetical conversation, hypothetically this hits. If they allow more than 2 copies, cool. Go get more than 2 copies of cards, everybody. Have fun with that. I mean, that would make everyone furious, but it's another thought if we were doing something like this. On the more like to put on my serious pants, I think it would be a hellish nightmare to balance Hearthstone for a 60 card format and keep the 30 card format that we currently have in the game at the same time.
And that's kind of why I have been equating this to Wild, because as much as they kind of keep Wild on the edge of their mind, they don't balance specifically for Wild. They balance specifically for their esport, for standard. Like that's what they're looking at when they're bringing in new cards, and for the majority of time when they're doing nerfs or buffs. So I think that any mode that kind of was like this, that had potentially like balance breaking combos of, you know, classes or cards or whatever, then they're not going to balance for that. They're going to balance for standard. So that's why, like, where you're talking about calling this a hardcore mode, I don't necessarily think I agree with that, because I think this is just going to be a little crazy and a little out of control. And I don't know if that's like, I don't see how that's like more hardcore or more betterer.
So eloquently put.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting.
I'm
for
a
sure,
pro talker.
But yeah, I think the schism in our way of thinking is really interesting because I read this and I'm like, oh, what a wacky and fun mode. when I read that, and I don't mean that as a put down, but as in the mind of someone who's been playing Hearthstone nonstop since its release, the thought of like going dual class in a 60 card deck, I'm like, that sounds like a brawl. Like 1 week only, get in here, go nuts.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll come back one day. But, yeah, so it's interesting. I'm glad you're enjoying it though. I'm like, I want to know more about like what brought you back, and also how old are you? Because you say in my younger years, it's like Hearthstone hasn't been out that long. But
well, yeah, but the difference between a 15-year-old to a 20-year-old, man, that's a leap and a half in terms of maturity.
Is it? I mean, you should have known me when I was 20.
Yeah, well.
I mean, frankly, I don't think I've matured that much to now. I mean, 15-year-old me and 32-year-old me, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Yep. Still laugh at fart jokes.
Well, who doesn't? Farts are hilarious.
And I still blame video games when I lose instead of myself. I've learned nothing.
But yeah, I would be really, really interested to hear, what brought Marky back and what he's enjoying so much about Hearthstone now. And yeah, I want to hear more. So send us a follow-up email or hit us up on Twitter or Patreon.
Yeah, at TAC Podcast. But interesting idea for sure. Keep the emails coming. TACpodcast@gmail.com. Or the patron Discord. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of The Angry Chicken. I'd like to remind everybody again, we are giving away 5 Tombs of Terror Deluxe Adventure Bundle codes, courtesy of Blizzard. Thank you again to Blizzard for sending us those 5 codes. Go to amove.tv and look for the Gleam, Gleam entry. We'll embed it in a blog post over on amove.tv for you. You can enter using your Twitch account, following AmoveTV on Twitch, visiting youtube.com/AmoveTV, or following at TAC Podcast on Twitter. Each one is an entry. You can do all 4. If you're already doing these things, you just go to Gleam, click on it. It'll be like, cool, you did the thing. You're entered. So go check it out. Giving away 5 of those. And we're going to pull our winners on Friday morning. So you've got some days. Got some days, everybody. Also, Taco, if you're a $2 and up patron, head on over to patreon.com/TAC. Sign up for the Angriest Chicken Open for Oldham. We're doing best of 5 conquest with 1 ban, no shield phase, on September 28th. We'll be reminding you of that as we get closer. Thanks again to our patrons supporting us over at patreon.com/TAC. Huge thanks to our producers, Declan H., Sean C., and Cheesy Bob. Thank you for the support. And check it out, patreon.com/TAC. If you like the show, want to support us, we would appreciate it. Before we go, Jocelyn, where can people find all of the other awesome content that you're creating?
You can find me on Twitter and Twitch. I'm at Joss Plays. That's JOCE Plays. And probably for the next couple months, I'm going to be reminding you guys to head on over to the Extra Life website. I will put the link in the show notes because we are doing our Extra Life charity push again this year that benefits Children's Miracle Network of Hospitals. I am quite close to hitting the $10,000 raised mark. So yeah, if you guys have a little bit of extra cash laying around, it's a really, really good cause. And even if you don't, it really helps to share the link and get the word out there. It's an amazing cause, and I have a great time every year. So I'll be streaming over on twitch.tv/JossPlays for Extra Life quite a few times through October and November. So do go and check that out.
I'm Garrett Art on Twitter. I would also like to promote your Extra Life stream because that's a really good cause and everyone should go check it out and donate if you're able. Everything else I do is at amove.tv. This podcast, Into the Nexus, is still going strong. Heroes of the Storm just refuses to die. It's a great game. Plenty of updates still coming. We're on the BlizzCon poster. Frankly, I wasn't so sure we were going to be.
Nice.
Being Heroes of the Storm. We know there's going to be a panel, so lots of hero stuff going on. Check out Into the Nexus. A brand new episode of Let's Talk About Star Wars just posted. If you want to hear me talk about my time at Galaxy's Edge in Florida alongside Jenny Josephson and Tom Merritt, Let's Talk About Star Wars is wherever podcasts can be found. Other than that, I am streaming Classic WoW. And this week, I'm streaming it in the mornings on Wednesday and Friday. You can find me at 8 a.m. Eastern, sucking down coffee like I'm going to die for coffee and Classic with me, Garrett. Twitch.tv/AmoveTV start at 8 a.m. Eastern. So especially you European listeners out there, because I like to wake up and get and get stuff done. I have to play WoW really early because I also have like work I need to get done. So if I don't, I'm hooked, and I just need to carve out time. And at this point, the only way to carve out time is to sacrifice my sleep. So
what you're telling me is that when I finish my stream tonight, I can just host a move and you'll be live with Classic.
How do you survive?
I also like to stream for the European audiences. I just do it at the end of my day instead of the start.
Yeah, but so I'm testing the waters this week. So I did it Monday. I'm gonna do it Wednesday. Gonna do it Friday. Coffee and Classic. Come join me. Twitch.tv/AMoveTV starting at 8 a.m. Eastern time for a WoW Classic stream in the AM. And that's gonna wrap it up for this episode of the Angry Chicken. Thank you all for tuning in. We will be back next week. But until then, job's done.
Job's done.